iPad Air 4, the first mid-range iPad to get complete redesign in 2020. Flat edges, USB-C, and gorgeous liquid retina display. So let's go ahead and replace the battery. I'm starting to heat at the top because there's less adhesive around the front-facing camera and sensor array compared to the bottom where the charging port sits. The screen on these iPad Airs is laminated directly to the digitizer, which makes it thin and gorgeous, but also way more fragile than older non-laminated displays. Never push your plastic pick in more than a few millimeters if you're not absolutely sure what's underneath. The Air 4 has a thin tolerance between the glass and the internal components. You go too deep and you can slice right into the display cable. So I'm heating each section and working my way around. I'm using my other plastic picks as spacers so the screen doesn't fall back into the frame. The key here is patience. Rush this part and you'll crack the display. We're almost there. Just remember, don't rush. Okay, the glue seems pretty loose. I'm opening this like a book with a hinge on the right side because that's where all the flex cables connect. Here's the crucial part that some of the guides skip. We need to disconnect the battery before we touch those display cables. Why? Because even though the device is off, there's still power flowing through the system, and you can cause a short circuit. I'm only removing the shields, but I'm not disconnecting the cables yet. I'm taking my plastic pick and gently wedging it between the battery connector on the logic board and the connector coming from the battery itself. This will physically break the power connection to the main board. Now it's safe to pop up those display flex cables. With the display fully disconnected, I can set it aside because we won't need it again until reassembly. Okay, here comes the tough part. The battery sits partially under the logic board's connector area. I'm using isopropyl alcohol to break down the adhesive. Some people prefer to heat from the back, but I find alcohol works faster and there's less risk of damaging the battery cells with excessive heat. Not likely with the heat levels we're talking about, but why take the chance? I'm working a plastic card under the edges of the battery, going slow and steady. Never use metal tools directly on the battery. Lithium-ion cells have thin aluminum pouches and one puncture can cause thermal runaway. Here's the tricky part. The logic port needs to lift slightly to get the battery out. You'll basically have to lift both the battery and the board simultaneously. The logic board is held down with adhesive too, so if it's not budging, either heat the back of the iPad or use more alcohol to loosen it. You can damage the main board here or damage the connectors on the main board. Here you can see how it looks like from the side. To install the new battery, we just reverse everything. The new battery slides in at an angle. Gently guide it in until the connector lines up with its socket under the logic board. You don't force it. If it's not sliding in smoothly, you've got the angle wrong. Next step is removing the old adhesive from where the screen sits. I'm using a metal spudger, but be careful around the battery because you can cause a fire. I'm using a pre-cut double-sided adhesive tape, which is going to hold down the screen when we put it back together. So this part is crucial. Never seal up the iPad before testing. I'm reconnecting the display flex cables and then reconnecting the battery. We need to make sure everything works fine. I'm also putting back the metal shields. This will hold the flex cables in place. I'm pressing the power button to see if it boots. If the battery is completely depleted, it might need a few minutes on the charger before it will power on. So the screen is responding, touch is working, and it's exactly what we want to see. I'm also testing that the battery charges properly. If the battery was defective, or if I damaged the connector during the installation, the iPad would either not charge or would show strange battery behavior. But everything looks good here. I'm applying a liquid adhesive sealant around the edges. This isn't just for holding the screen in place, it also restores some of the water and dust resistance. If you use a similar one, just make sure you let it cure for a while before you use the device. Press it down firmly. Check if there are any bumps or lifts in the screen. If everything looks fine, good to go. If you made it this far, you just learned why iPad battery replacements cost what they do at the repair shops. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.